A very good afternoon, rather very good evening to all assembled here. It's a great pleasure to come back to ICT and talk a few thoughts that I've been going through in the last few months in terms of what really is taking place in the industry, right, and what we should probably try and do to the new and upcoming kids, the students who are prospecting to get into the industry. So let me start by talking about a few business contextual changes or the large contextual changes that's taking place in the industry. Now, first of all, if you look at it, the mortality rate is at 7.7%, somewhere about that, especially in Tamil Nadu. Natality is about 15 point something. So what does this tell us? We are growing at about 8% annually, especially in Tamil Nadu, right? So which means this also tells us with the lifestyle changes that we are introducing that's coming up, the average life expectancy is increasing humongously. It's somewhere in the 70s now. It used to be in the early 50s to mid 50s, late 50s. Now it's got to like mid 70s. So what's going to happen is we're going to have people with a varied or diverse age group competing for the same job that's available today, right? So which means people with different skills, less skills, large skills, no skills are going to be competing for exactly same job. That's number one. Contextual change. Let's try and look at something else also. Now, larger cities, larger metropolitans have, by virtue of their growth, introduced a little bit of a challenge which makes productivity, while metropolitans are supposed to be increasing productivity, there are situations, especially in industries as ours, productivity levels are starting to go down. This results in a very important paradoxical constraint, which is, hey, am I by virtue of giving more exposure, getting larger things available to people, reducing the deployment levels, right? As in, when I say deployment levels, there's something that people call unemployment, which some of our speakers talked about. I'm going to talk about another one, which is called underemployment. So if you've got like 10 hours that are supposed to be working, now you actually end up contributing only about 6, 7, 5, whatever number of hours. Now that reduces productivity humongously. This is a contextual change, and this is going to impact, this is going to result in work migrating to smaller clusters, smaller, newer, emerging communities where this challenge would be kind of reduced, right? So that's the second context. Why is this important to the academia? Because academia has got to think and see, hey, where am I going to go place my kids that are going to come out of college? It's very, very important. And prepare them for these contextual changes. So that is contextual change number 2. Now let's try and look at contextual change number 3. Some of our earlier speakers alluded to this as well, which is the nature of work by itself. Gone are the days where work used to be a set of activities. You come in at like 8:30, well, for some it's 10. You come in at like 8:30, 9 in the morning, and then you go on to like 5:30. For some of us, it's like 9:30 in the night, where it's a bunch of activities that you try and complete within that given day. But work, my dear friends, is becoming more and more unstructured. Yeah? Unstructured.org is the new paradigm. Work is becoming more and more complex. Work is becoming more and more unstructured. Why is it becoming more and more unstructured? It's becoming more and more unstructured because of interference of technology and interference of how technology has in the business context of the end customer. Many of us try and do businesses for end customers, right? The interference of technology in end customers is so high that the nature of work by itself has changed significantly. That's number 3. Now let's try and look at number 4, which many of our speakers have talked about. There's so much of news in the media of late, in the last many months, years I should say, where right from the days of steam engine, right, productivity levels got enhanced by about say 0.5% because steam engines came in. Now McKinsey predicts that with the new buzzword in the industry called automation, which many of the speakers talked about, the productivity levels is going to increase anywhere between 0.8 and like 1.7 or 1.8% over the next 25-30 years, not today, over the next 25-30 years. Now with this, I had a much larger, try and stitch this back with my first business context change that I was trying to talk to you about, which is there's a much larger supposed to be productive population because of the higher life age prediction that's going on. Now what's going to happen is with this, there's so much more pressure in terms of what really do we produce, what really do we need to train our people on, not just people coming out of colleges, but in general, and that's what ICT is trying to address. So automation is a key word. With automation, our previous speaker, Veerabhadraswamy, also talked about the so-called low-end jobs will vanish. They will not be existent in the industry, in every particular industry. I mean, try and take an example. I still recall the days when somebody wanted to get into a surgery and there's this doctor who says, hey, can you go find out if all the equipments are fine, they're working? Many times they don't, which is one of the reasons why surgical failures take place significantly, right? So there are those technicians, whosoever, who goes around figuring out, do I have this tooth sawyer? Is this working? Does it have the right battery? Does it have the right parameters and so on? There's this bone cutter. Sorry, I'm using kind of gross examples, but that's reality, right? When you get into a surgical situation, I've got a little bit of healthcare services delivery in the IT side background. That's one of the reasons why I'm talking about some examples in the space. Of course, this plus a few other things in media as well. So those kinds of small, low-end technician jobs are starting to fade away, and take it from me, in about 6 to 8 years, 85-90% of such low-end jobs in every particular industry will just vanish. So what does that mean? That means the low-end jobs will go, which means the people that were performing the low-end jobs, if they continue to have only that skill, are going to be irrelevant in the market. So they're going to need to get themselves upgraded to what today is the mid-level jobs, if they're aspiring to somewhere along the traditional lines, right? So that's the fourth thing as an example. Now the question is, so what do we do? So some of our speakers talked about, there was this T model, right? That's the classic thing. The T model is so important because it's again a paradoxical business context expectation where you've got to be not just a jack of all trades, you've got to be a master of many. That's the expectation in the market. That not just the IT industry, every industry. If I try and relate it back to the academia, right? As an example, coming from computer science background, I don't really know how many of you in here have computer science background, right? If you try and teach, say, automata theory, NFA, DFA, right? State transitions. Now, it's not so much so important to just try and learn some of these terminology as kids coming out of colleges, but it's very, very important to understand how state transitions take place. What is the difference between a non-finite automaton and a definite finite automaton? Which kinds of contextual usages do they get into? Where do you try and look for an NFA kind of situation? Is Uber, if there are like 15, many of us talked about Uber in the morning and even afternoon, right? There are like 15 different state transitions in the workflow of Uber, right? I think you should try and go back and do a practical example of this. How does the state transition take place? Teach them that. Teach them the ability to think, not terminology. That's very, very important, right? So the ability to think, the ability to relate to real life context is of paramount importance. So what do? We are in the services industry, many of us, right? I mean, this is the other fifth thing that I think we should probably know, which is 30% of India's workforce, right, as of a year ago, is into the services business, contributing to somewhere in the 60% plus of our GDP. Humongous, 50% close to that thereof is somewhere within agriculture, as in number of people employed. So your GDP still today is impacted significantly by the amount of people, the caliber of people that's in the services industry. So which means if you as a college, you as an academic institution, if you're looking to get your people placed into services industry, it doesn't have to be just IT industry, it can be any services industry for that matter. It can be hotel, it can be hospitality industry, wherever, right? There are certain characteristics that these people need to have. Try and stitch these characteristics with the 5 or 6 business context changes that I talked about a little while back. So let's speak about a few characteristics or individual traits. Of course, the most basic, essential thing is communication. Communication does not mean English. English is just one thing. The ability to communicate a thought, a piece of view, a point of view to an audience in whatever language be it is of prime essence. Language, as in English, could certainly turn out to be useful. The second point of communication here, if I were to do a point B, is how well does that communication take place? Because in the services industry, the finesse with which somebody speaks, I mean, Coimbatore is known for hospitality, being nice, people being polite and all that. That's the kind of people that we need in the services industry anywhere in India. You don't want people that end up being brash, being curt, saying, "Sir, it's mudiya sir, enala. Sorry, sir." That's not service. Service is a bunch of attributes. Teach them that right in the college days. Very, very important, because this is one of the things that we get to see when we go about hiring people. Now, the second point that we should try and look at is, I talked about unstructured, right? There's a huge gap because there's so much of structured thinking, traditional approach that's being taught in our academia today, whereas the industry requires a significant amount of unstructured abilities to perform, not just knowledge which is technology based. Unstructured abilities include the ability to dynamically assume things, assume leadership, assume charge, assume accountability, especially in the services industry, right? Because without that, what happens is the customer with who one person gets to interface or interact with gets a little not so thrilled, and then the attribute of service gets lost between the organization delivering the service or the individual representing the organization delivering the service and the customer that's consuming it. Right? So the dynamic ability to stand up and say, yes, I can do this, and here's why I think I can do it, or let me take charge. That's an ability that has to be taught, that has to be honed. I mean, today I think I'm going to speak a little bit of softer elements because there were several technical and multiple dimensions of technology that were spoken already. The third thing, again, that needs to be seen as the context change that I spoke about earlier demands that the newer jobs that are coming in are intelligence-based jobs. As I said, the lower order jobs will go away, the higher order jobs, newer kinds of jobs are coming in, and all these jobs are extremely intelligence-based jobs. So if there is one other element that we got to teach folks at any particular age group is the ability to be intelligent. Now the question is it a skill or is it talent? I think a good amount of intelligence can be taught. People can be made to become intelligent to some extent, which traditionally is not our belief. We all believe intelligence is an innate ability right from birth. I don't believe so. The kind of problems that we put our kids through, the kind of situations, contextual discussions that we try and put them through, enables their mind to think larger, to think wider, gets them into newer ways of solving a problem. Those are abilities that are extremely going to be appreciated in the future ways of working because life is going to be very, very unstructured. Gone are the days, right? I mean, for those of you who have been thinking or hearing the terms of typical IT industry saying application development, application services, infrastructure, application support, infrastructure support, and so on, many of these are going to change significantly. I mean, today, if there are organizations that do like 10%, that spend their 10% of their time in development kind of activities, I think that by itself is a large amount, right? Life is moving on. There's so much more that's loose. This is the other paradoxical change, right? There's so many loosely coupled elements that are there that need to be put together to solve a customer's business problem. That is the ability, ladies and gentlemen, that we would like you to teach out there right from colleges. Because that's an ability that has to be honed. If it doesn't get honed, our kids are going to be left behind in the world competition. Like they say, right, in the race between humans and machines, at some point, humans will win. And why? Because there is that ability, that aspect of intelligence, which no matter what, at some point, machines will not be able to scale. Today, of course, machines are trying to scale. We saw the thing like a few weeks ago where I think Facebook's bots started thinking much more than what they predicted. But I think it still is far away from what humans can think truly. The sixth one that I think is very important that our kids need to go through is being multidisciplinary, as our previous speaker Veerabhadran was talking about. You can take any industry for that matter. You can take healthcare industry, you can take a health delivery industry, you can take a pharmaceutical industry, you can take a travel transportation industry. The ability to perform multiple jobs is what is really asked for in today's context, and so much so it will be in tomorrow's context as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me try and summarize. There are 5 broad contextual changes that we spoke about that's taking place in the industry, which all of you need to be cognizant of. This is very, very important because that's what is going to help you make a decision as to where you're going to place your students coming out of your respective institutions into. Is it going to be in industries, the context, these 5 broad context places where these contextual changes are taking place, or is it not? Then the next question that you want to ask yourself is it in the services industry or not in services industry? If it's services industry, there's a whole bunch of technology background that our earlier speakers spoke about. I did speak about some softer elements as well, right? So if you keep this in mind, that should give you a perspective as to what you want to get your people trained on. I know it's been a wonderful afternoon that many of our speakers came in and spoke. I hope you had some takeaways from this. Thank you for the opportunity. Wish you all the very best. Thank you.